Hey church, my name is Moses Camacho. I'm the senior pastor of South Hills, and today I have someone very special with me, none other than our very own founding pastor, Chris Sonkson. Chris, I'd love for you to share with our church how you and Laura ultimately came to this idea of launching South Hills.
It was March 29th, 1998. We started it because it seemed like church was just for the church. And our heart was, man, we want to reach the unchurched and we're going to do whatever we can to go after it. So we moved into our in-laws. We started forming together a little small group in Norco, California. We built that group up to 30 or 40 people. But when we launched, we had to trust God so much for finances. We had to trust God for equipment and a place to meet. And then those 40 people had to give and to sacrifice. And I've noticed over the years as we've gone in from the Masonic Lodge where we started to Citrus Hills Intermediate School. Then we bought the property. And then we went to add another campus and another campus. And I've always noticed one thing, Moses, is that church and the journey of building a church is always people trusting God, then the next group, people trusting God, then the next group, people trusting God. It's a strange thing of constantly paying it forward. You're trusting God in the present and you're paying it forward for the future. And it's been all about trying to reach people, make a difference for the kingdom, and continuing to build. And I'm excited for South Hills now because we're continuing to build, but personally, I think we're just getting started.
Yeah, I'm sure you probably have hundreds of stories of people who came to you as South Hills was going and people who were grateful that this church existed.
I remember one specifically, comes to my mind, as in our first permanent building, which is there in Corona. All the leaders got together one Saturday morning to pray over the building. We walked around this building that was being built and cement was going up, and we had an opportunity to write names on a wall. And a lot of people don't know, but if you're at the Corona campus and you look to the right and you see the screen, all below that screen, under all that paint, are hundreds of names. I remember one time on a Sunday praying for someone, and he's crying on my shoulder, and it was an intense moment, and he kind of pulled back a little bit from hugging me, and he pointed over the wall and he said, "My name's on that wall." That was one story that kept going. I kept hearing, "My name's on that wall. My name's on that wall." And those names are still there today.
Something special about South Hills is it just does church differently. It communicates God's word differently in a way where people can understand no matter where they're at in their journey. What's a story that you can think back of someone who ultimately struggled in other places but came to South Hills and was grateful for how South Hills does church?
I'll never forget standing out there with a guy that somehow bumped into the church and said, "I'll give you one chance." And we walked in together, and he gave his life to Christ on that day. And he just kept showing up week after week after week after week, got a Bible, started reading, started praying, got baptized, the whole 9 yards. When I look back and I talked to him about it several times, he said, "It was nothing I expected," and showed what we've strived for all these years. That to me is a perfect example of what we want to continue to do.
South Hills, that story right there is what attracted me to this church. And we've been intentional with making sure that we are going to move South Hills and the way South Hills does church from not just the city of Corona, but to multiple cities through California. And now moving it into other states and soon to be many other states. Here's the thing. We can have all the heart and vision and ideas in the world, but without you, they're just ideas. What makes them a reality is your partnership. You help make our mission to lead unchurched people into a growing relationship with Christ possible. Without the money to practically hire staff, open campuses, host Sunday services, we wouldn't see lives transformed or communities built. So thank you, church, for your partnership with us and making the heart of South Hills community a reality. When we say we couldn't do this without you, we really mean it. And we are so thankful to be able to build together.
The Bible is a tough read. It's complex, cryptic, and confusing. Even if you know some of the stories, how do they all fit together? How does the average person make sense of this ancient book? And what does it have to do with us?
Maybe you've noticed, but there are a lot of things in life that are hard. How many would agree? Like, for example, being a parent is hard. And I don't know about you, but last year, I thought I knew how to hit a golf ball. But believe me, that was hard. I missed like 4 times, and I ended up breaking the actual golf stick. I don't know what you call that, but I ended up breaking that. And we were at a resort, so I think that cost us like $300-400. It is hard to hit a golf ball, but you know what also is hard? Relationships are hard, especially relationships that are long distance. Anybody ever experienced a long distance relationship before? Thank you for your honesty. A couple people in here. Maybe you've experienced it. Maybe you've known someone that has experienced it, but it is hard. And as you did experience it, as you were in that long distance relationship, you kind of eventually hit a wall because you realized that it wasn't for you. You realized that it was incredibly hard. Maybe you didn't realize that being apart from that partner of yours didn't help your sense of insecurity. It didn't help your jealousy because being apart made it worse. Or maybe you didn't think about that being in a long distance relationship, it was going to be expensive. You were going to have to fly out, maybe if she or he was in New York and Arizona, if you didn't drive, you were going to have to fly out. And it costs money to fly out. Maybe you didn't think about it, but it was difficult for you to be in this long-distance relationship because you couldn't read emotions through text. You couldn't read emotions through a phone call, and it made it super hard. And maybe you finally did hit this wall because you struggled with the always being away part. You couldn't take it no more. And the truth is this, that distance makes you feel distant. Distance makes you feel distant. We've all been through this, whether it's in relationships, through family, through a friend, or even through when we experience this through COVID, right? We struggle with being separated. Why? Because we wanted to be close. We wanted that face-to-face presence. We needed that connection because the distance made us feel distant. And if we're honest this morning, if we could put some spiritual context to this, for some of us, that's what our relationship with God feels like sometimes, distant. We crave that connection with Him, but He doesn't feel close. We go through the motions of trying to feel connected, but it feels like something is not working. See, if this sounds familiar to you, if you're here this morning, you're in good company because the interactions with God throughout the Old Testament played out like a long-distance relationship. As we saw through weeks 1 and 2 in our series, people didn't walk and talk with God. They connected with Him from a distance by carrying out rules, rituals, sacrifices. But at some point, God said, you know what? I need to change this up. I need to get closer. No more long distance stuff. No more distance between me and my creation. So watch what God does. God concluded between, as we seen last week, by being with. Which leads us to our third short word of with. Everybody say with. So after 400 years of silence, God would bring an end to between by telling a man and his fiancée, Joseph and Mary, they're going to have a baby, and his name was going to be named Jesus. And if you've been following our series is about how to make sense of the Bible, how to understand the Bible. As Jesus comes into the picture, we arrive into the New Testament. The New Testament is when Jesus arrives. It talks about His life, His death, the resurrection, the 4 Gospels, the book of Acts, letters to the church, and even Revelation. Now I want you to watch how the Gospel of Matthew in the New Testament tells us how Jesus became one of us to be with us. If you brought your Bibles, you can open up to Matthew chapter 1, verse 23. And it says this, "The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God, there's that word again, with us. God with us. So Mary was pregnant by the Holy Spirit with a boy that they would call Jesus, which meant God with us. Other gods were somewhere else. Other gods weren't present. Other gods kept their distance. But can I tell you this morning, this God, your God, Jesus, came close. God wants to be close to us. And so when we read the New Testament, it outlines the story of Jesus' birth in great detail. But what's interesting is that once he is born, there's little, to nothing about him for 30 years. Ever think about that? Ever thought about that while you were having dinner or breakfast? It only gives us a small glimpse of Jesus as a boy. For example, Luke 2:40, it says this, "And the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was with him." So Luke records a few stories of Jesus' childhood. It shows how Jesus, as a child, grew strong, and he, not only spiritually, but physically. He was wise, and God was with him. But that's it. Nothing more after that. And then, when in the New Testament, when the story of Jesus picks up, ta-da, he's a man. He's an adult. Now, think about that for a minute. I find this very interesting. The Bible doesn't speak a lot about Jesus' childhood. It doesn't go in depth into his childhood, teenage years. I wonder why. Maybe those parts of his life were not that interesting that somebody didn't want to document it, so thousands of years later, we wouldn't have to read about it. I mean, he had to learn how to walk. He had to learn how to talk. He did chores like you and I did. He learned to work. He was a carpenter, and he learned to make money to maybe pay rent and take his family out. He did a lot of things that you and I do as well. Maybe he had to sit at the kitchen table at dinner eating vegetables with broccoli and butter, hearing his family say a bad joke. You know? I mean, he went to visit family members. He went to visit friends. He went to synagogue. In other words, he went to churches. He was among people. But can I just make this clear for you? Just because the history of Jesus' life before he was 30 wasn't documented, it doesn't mean that he wasn't present. In fact, Jesus was so committed to being with humanity that he was 100% there in moments that no one ever documented. I think you and I, in some way, we can relate to this. Because when it comes to our unfun days, when it comes to those days of pain, maybe even those days of joy, those days of love, those days of loss, in your most meaningful moments, even in those moments in your life that you don't want nobody to document because it's so bad, it doesn't mean that God is not there. God is with you. He is present no matter what. I'll just say this to the people that are online. God is with you no matter what. If you're going through something bad that you say, I don't even want to remember. I'm not going to write it on this diary. I don't want this documented because I don't want to speak about it. God is there present in those moments as well. And you know what's challenging? For you and I to believe that. It's hard enough. It's not enough. Let me say it this way. It's not enough for you and I to know that God is there. Because as humans, you know what we do? Okay, God, prove it. Show me a miracle. I want to see a miracle. I want to see you work in my family, in my job. Show me that you are there. I've done that before. I don't know if you've done that before. But it takes trust. No matter what, God is with you. He is present. So let's circle back to the Gospels. Now we have an adult Jesus. He's no longer a kid. He's now in his 30s. He's 30 years of age. And before he starts his ministry, before he starts getting rocking and rolling and preaching and saving, watch what the first thing he does. It's super, super impressive. Watch what he does. He starts choosing and handpicking people to share his life with and his work with. Jesus wasn't only choosing followers, he was also choosing friends, people to hang out and do life with. Think about it. He could have easily saved the world all by himself. He could have been He-Man, Jesus. You guys didn't get that joke, He-Man? No? My favorite cartoon. He could have done all this by himself, but he chose, being Jesus, he chose to include others. He chose those that were like the long shots, right? He chose those last to be picked. He chose people that most people would never choose on their team. And his first disciples weren't religious leaders. This is impressive. They weren't politicians, right? They weren't influencers. They didn't have a couple thousand followers on Instagram. The friends he chose, they weren't well connected. They were just regular people. And if I could just imagine and just put this into perspective, I'm imagining Jesus walking down the road. And he says, you know what, I'm going to start building my team. And this was his invitation, as simple as this. In Matthew 4:19, it says this, come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. Without any small talk or explanation, Jesus said, follow me. In other words, his invitation was this, hey, come and do life with me. Can you come alongside me, please? Can you learn to be like me? I need friends too. This was his invitation. So he picks these people, and now we get to the part where he finally starts to do ministry. He didn't do ministry first. He starts choosing his friends to do ministry with. And he starts with his first sermon. Now, let's have some fun. Anybody want to have fun? Yeah. Then stay after for the basketball. If you were Jesus today, knowing what you know today, knowing how bad it is out there in the world, what would you preach? I'll let that sink in for 10 seconds. What would you preach? What subject will you speak about in your first sermon if you were Jesus? Let me help you. How about heaven and hell? How about the definition of marriage? How about the consequences of sin? What about which political party heaven supports? What about gossip or truth? Or how to run a church service? What would your first sermon be? The importance of tithe. Why lust is a world problem. These are all great topics, but if I could just tell you, Jesus didn't speak about any of this in his first sermon. Watch what he says and does in Luke 4, verses 17 to 21. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, the Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone, after he said this, after he did this sermon in the synagogue, were fastened on him. He began by saying to them, today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. See, this wasn't accidental. Just like Jesus could have addressed a lot of important topics in his day and even in our day, he chose to focus on who. He chose to focus on who he was there for. And that's the heart of Jesus, an open invitation to a relationship with him. But this is also interesting. How was he going to give good news to the poor? How was he going to set the captives free? How was he going to help the blind see? Let me see. Let's kind of think here for a minute. How was he going to do that? Maybe by amassing big political power. Maybe by passing a law. Maybe by publicly punishing sinners. Not quite. Jesus solves all the problems of the world, the brokenness and mess of our lives by coming to be with us. And I find this fascinating. Apparently, by just spreading good news and spending a lot of time, I'll say it this way, by spending a lot of unhurried time with people was the way that Jesus was going to bring good news, set the oppressors free, cure those that were blind. Watch, in Matthew 11:19, says this, the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of a tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by her deeds. People saw Jesus hang out with tax collectors, with sinners, to the point of saying, hey, Jesus is friend of all these sinners, all these tax collectors, all these people we hate. In other words, Jesus comes close. Jesus comes with the people and makes time to hang out and chat, no matter how they were living, no matter what their situation was. I find this very interesting. See, Jesus came to be with the people that everyone else didn't want to be with. That's super interesting. Why would Jesus want to be friends with sinners? Follow me. Why would Jesus want to be friends with tax collectors? Why would Jesus want to be friends to the brokenness, to the blind, to the oppressed? Here's why. And I hope we get this morning. Because in Jesus' mind, the only thing that can take place of the sin is the presence of God. Say, I'm going to hang out with the sinners and I'm going to bring my presence, and that's going to change them. I'm going to hang out with the tax collectors. I'm going to hang out with the brokers. I'm going to hang out with the oppressed, and with my presence, they will change. He didn't need to speak about it. He didn't need to judge them. He didn't need to bring a topic about it. All he needed was his presence. I'll say it this way. All Jesus did is come close. He wanted to have a relational experience and relationship with the people instead of being impersonal. And I think Jesus was onto something, because I think he kind of knew that all sin stems from a relational problem and can only be solved with a relational solution. I'll say it again, then I'll explain this. All sin stems from a relational problem and can only be solved with a relational solution. For example, I don't know about you, it's happened to me, but if you've ever worked with kids, oh boy, how do we say that? Lord, have mercy. There's always a kid in the group who is challenging to deal with, right? If you've ever worked with kids. They don't follow the rules. They don't do what they're supposed to do. And what's so bad, what gets me irritated, is that they rope other kids into their rebellion. And your reaction might be to scold them, to ignore them, and to tell them why they're wrong, is to bring a great subject about kids and parenting. You push them aside. You don't give them the attention. And often the outcome is not the one you want. But what I've learned, even with my own kids, is that if you lean in, if you give them attention, if you get to know them, if you develop a relationship with them, if you take a genuine interest in their life, if you come close to them, their behavior will eventually change. Their behavior corrects itself. You had to come close. And that's what Jesus did. He came to be with us, and a lot of people wanted Jesus to demand, right? A lot of people wanted Jesus to correct, to judge, and to be harsh on people, to slam the door on people. But Jesus preferred the route of being relational. You know, instead of like doing this and this, that, I'm going to just get close to them. I'm going to just love on them. I'm going to be relational. See, because he knew that all sin stands for a relational problem and can only be solved with a relational solution. But maybe one of the most interesting things about Jesus was that relationships weren't just something he knew that we needed, but it's something that he needed as well. What? Jesus needed something? Actually, he did. Watch. In Matthew 26:38. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Jesus is confessing, right, a deeply troubled state of mind because of what was going to happen with him. He was about to get betrayed and crucified. So I think he's begging his friends, says, don't leave, please don't go over there. If you're going to go preach, don't go preach. Please come and stay with me. The same way sometimes that you feel desperate and just want someone to sit with you and say, come over, talk to me. I need this. Please come over with me. That's the way Jesus felt. See, Jesus needed his friends to be with him as well. Back in 98, 99, I remember graduating from high school. Yes. Who said, ooh? I remember graduating from high school. Then I remember graduating from a trade school. And after I graduated from both schools, I got my first official interview. Like professional interview. Man, I couldn't sleep. I was super nervous. I was sweating. I studied for that interview like a lot. And I got to the interview and I sat down and it was a German person. Super awesome. And I don't know why I said this, but I did. I said, you know what? I'm young. I just graduated from high school and even trade school. But I'll work for free for you for 2 weeks. Just like you're looking at me, like, what? That person was looking at me like, work for free for 2 weeks? I said, listen, I'm eager to learn. I'm eager to work. I'll work for you for free for 2 weeks. Don't pay me. Just let me show you what I could do. The next day I was hired. Yes. And I started my 25-year logistics career. But I say this because when I started working, she said, hey, I know you told me that you weren't going to charge me, but I'm going to pay you for your sincerity and your eagerness to learn. We need people like you. Cool. Pay me. Awesome. I went to work, and you know what helped me? Is that my older brother worked at the same company. Didn't speak up for me. Didn't say, hey, that's my brother Ozzy, hire him, nothing. I told him, just let me do this. My first day, he was with me, showing me the ropes. My first day, this is the bathroom, and this is the manager. Don't talk to that guy. Don't talk to this girl. Nothing. Just do your work. Don't start any gossip. He showed me the ropes. He came alongside me And you know what? That changed everything about my experience of my first official professional job. Having someone with me every step of the way made it doable, made it attainable. And that's exactly what Jesus promises to you. In Matthew 28:20, he says it like this: and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you, there's that word with you, to the very end of the age. So this is way of Jesus saying, hey, you know what? I am done with all this long distance stuff. It's not working. I can't take this no more. Give me the good stuff. I want to be with you. I want to be close with you, period. And it says, I am with you always, not part-time, not occasionally, not sometimes, not certain hours of the day, not only when life is great, but when life is kind of going bad. Jesus says, hey, I will be with you to help you along the way. So you can see that life is attainable, so you can see that you can have success in whatever you're doing. He is with you. This is why he said, and be sure of this, and surely I am with you. You know what Jesus is saying? He's saying this, hey, you know what? You could take this to the bank. When you want someone to really trust you and believe in what you're saying, you say this, hey, I surely tell you this. Trust me. You say these words because you want people to trust you and believe in your words. This is exactly what Jesus is doing. You could be sure of this. He's giving us something that we could all be sure that he's going to be with us. In your new job, at home, whatever you're going through, he is there to make it attainable for you. You're struggling? God is with you. He ended that long distance relationship to come close. And you know what? Let me put it this way. God is with us. And a lot of times, God is with us and is actually most present. In what? In the moment it appears he is most absent. We've all had these moments as a band comes up where we said, God, where are you? I thought you were close. I thought you ended the between. Where are you? I need you. You're a no-show, God. What's going on? But I can tell you, it's in these moments where God is most present in your life. In my heart for you today is this. What if we can live with this awareness that he's with us, no matter what's happening? See, if you knew that Jesus was with you 100% of the time, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what you're dealing with your attitude change? If you knew Jesus was with you, what would you be willing to try? Imagine having peace when life is scary, when life is unstable, when you don't know what's happening, when you feel overwhelmed by life. Imagine just knowing, hey, wait a minute, time out. God ended that between. I am not in a long distance relationship with God. He is not in a long distance relationship with me. He is close, not part-time, not some hours of the day, all the time. If we believe that, imagine how your life can change. Can I just be practical? And you might think this is funny, but it's okay. He's in the car with you. He's in your job. He's at home. He's sitting down next to your bed. how would this change the way you live? By knowing this all the time. Because this is the thing. He is there with you. God concluded between by being with. And if we believe that He's always there, He's right here, right now, right? You guys believe that He's here right now? Then why don't we talk to Him? Let's stand up and pray. God, thank you so much. Thank you for this reassurance, God. Thank you for reassuring that you ended that long distance relationship to come close with us. Thank you for loving us, even though, God, sometimes we fail, even though sometimes we ignore you, even though sometimes there's pride, even though you know we're going to sin, even though you know that we're not living a righteous life, even though you know all this, you risk saying, hey, I want to be with you all the time. God, and I just can't fathom that. How you love us so much. How you have mercy in our lives. How you just show us favor. And how you love us by just coming close no matter what is going on. You're close in the good times. You're close in those bad times. This morning we are so thankful because you just brought reassurance into our life. You brought reassurance that you're with us. You brought reassurance that life with you is attainable, that we could do it, that we could grow, that we could mature, that we could have success, that we could get out of whatever season we are in because you are with us. God, and I pray that today be life-changing. I pray that today anything, any scarcity, any problem, anything that was going on in our life stops today. And moving forward, it changes because you are not with us part-time. There's not a sign in you that says you're only with us through certain hours of the day. You are with us all the time. God, and I pray that we take this word in our mind, in our hearts. Because if you're with us, we are unstoppable. That changes everything. We are not alone. Father, I pray for this message. Thank you because it has been received in good soil where it's going to produce and grow and change us. Why don't we all lift our hands? If you're comfortable with that, lift your hands and let's sing along with the band.
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that He's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the third way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the fourth way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that He can bless and anoint your finances and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you and thank you for watching our online service today.